Hey, Pastor Josh here again. We are taking a look and continuing to look at God's judgment around all of the nations that are surrounding Israel. And so judgment begins at the house of the Lord. So God is disciplining his own children, but that doesn't mean the rest of the nations get off the hook. And so we looked at the Philistines yesterday, and then we looked at Egypt to the south. And so actually what happens is that Jeremiah is almost making like a little counterclockwise, clockwise look around Israel. And so it begins in the south in Egypt, then goes up to address the Philistines, which would be to their west. And then we go over to the other side, east on the other side of Judah, and we begin to talk about this nation of Moab. And so Moab is the country that we're talking about today. And actually for the next 3 days, today and the next 2 days, we will be talking about Moab. And this is a little bit odd because their military power seems to be is less than what it would be in the area. So the question would be, why is God spending so much time on Moab with these explanations? And so it seems like there would be more with Egypt than Moab, but Moab actually gets more discussion. You would think there would be more even on Edom when we get to look at that in a little bit. So let's jump into our reading, Isaiah 48, verses 1 through 13. Judgment on Moab. Concerning Moab, so Moab, the nation, was destroyed by Babylon in 582 BC. Now remember, when we're saying BC, remember it counts down until 0. So Jerusalem fell in what year? 586 BC. I know you got it right. That's when this tragic event happened, 586 BC. So Moab's cities were ultimately destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar in 582 BC. So still, Nebuchadnezzar wreaking havoc. Nebuchadnezzar is the hammer, is the tool that God is using to pass judgment on all of these nations. So concerning Moab, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, woe to Nebo city there in Moab, for it is laid waste. It's gone. Kirathim is put to shame. It is taken. The fortress is put to shame and broken down. The renown of Moab is no more. So right here, the fortress is put to shame and broken down. This is an attitude we need to have, is that every fortress can be broken down. Every major protection that you have can be broken down and destroyed. The biggest thing that brings you the greatest honor, that makes you the happiest, that you find your own personal value in, that can be turned to shame in a moment. And that's, again, this has been a theme that we've been looking at for the past several days, is that we need to make sure that we are not becoming arrogant in our place, in the things that we have and the things that we're able to do, because in a moment it can quickly turn to shame. We need to receive everything that we have in great humility. And if you do that, it is just amazing the personality and the kind of person you will be when you are not thinking that your successes and your abilities have truly come from yourself. It's come from the Lord, and he is the one that has helped you. And in a moment, it can be turned to shame. So it's an attitude we need to have. Your fortress, if you will, your big protection can be broken down at no time. And you might be famous, but in an instance, it can be no more. In Heshbon, this would be a city there in Moab. It's technically would have been a city that was actually technically supposed to be given to one of the tribes of Israel, and so, but this would be one of their main cities that they would have taken over on their expansion times. So it's toward the north during the time that they came to be taken over. That would have probably been the place that they entered through. So in Heshbon, they planned disaster against her. So they're planning, the incoming forces are planning their attack on the rest of the cities of Moab. Come, let us cut her off from being a nation. You also, O madmen, shall be brought to silence. The sword shall pursue you. So tough language for the Moabites. They are crazy. They are madmen. O voice, a cry from Horonaim, desolation and great destruction. So a great cry is coming out. They're going down. They're being destroyed. Moab is destroyed. Her little ones have made a cry. For at the ascent of Luith they go up weeping. So you have a picture of a mountain, and you have people, refugees, leaving the city that is being attacked, or perhaps fleeing before the city gets attacked, and they're walking up a mountain. And they're walking up crying and weeping. For at the descent of Horonaim they have heard the distressed cry of destruction. So they're ascending up Luith, because this other mountain, Horonaim, or this city that would be over here, they hear that this destruction is coming. And so they're trying to get out before it gets here. Flee, save yourselves. You will be like a juniper tree, a juniper in the desert. For because you trusted in your works and your treasures, you also shall be taken. So here's a sin to confess. You trusted in your works and your treasures. Again, this might go back to our kind of theme that I've been harping on here about being humble and realizing that God is ultimately in charge, and that our fortresses can be put to shame. Back here, you trusted in your works and your treasures. We do not trust in our own stuff. That is a sin. If you ever trust in your bank account more than you trust in God, you're in trouble. If you trust in your medicine more than you trust in God, you're in trouble. If you trust in your car more than you trust in God, you're in trouble. If you trust in your spouse or your kids more than you trust in God, you're in trouble. If you trust in your boss and your job more than you trust in the Lord, you are in trouble. We should be trusting in the Lord. And when we don't, we're ultimately trusting in our works or the works of somebody else. We're trusting in the treasures that we have rather than trusting in God. And that is a great sin, and it will be our great shame, because in a moment, those things can be taken away at any time. And Chemosh shall go into exile. This is their God. So the picture is, not only are the people of Moab fleeing Nebuchadnezzar, fleeing the Babylonian army, they're also carrying their God away too, because their God cannot fight. In fact, their God is not a God. He's going into exile with his priests and his officials. Now, this is interesting for us to think about, because when God sends his people to exile, he does say that he's going with them, but he never implies that he's ever leaving the homeland, and that he is leaving the protection of the place where his people is supposed to be. But Chemosh, though, is pictured as being carried away by the Moabites and the priests and the officials. The destroyer shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. Nobody's going to run away from him. The valley shall perish, and the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord has spoken. All of this is happening because God has spoken. It's a promise there. Give wings to Moab, for she would fly away. Her cities shall become a desolation with no inhabitant in them. Most this is actually, if you're wanting some little background history discussions, they struggle with this word wings. The Hebrew word is not very similar, or is not very common, and some are wanting to translate it salt, saying that it would be that ancient practice of putting salt in the cities and the fields, so that of the people that they've conquered, so that they won't be able to grow crops in the future. Some are saying that this is just basically a warning to Moab. Hey, you need to get away now before Nebuchadnezzar comes. Give wings to Moab, for she would fly away. Verse 10, cursed is he who does the work of the Lord with slackness. Cursed is he who keeps back his word, or keeps back his sword from bloodshed. Of course, this is a discussion about God executing judgment and saying that it needs to be done quickly. King Nebuchadnezzar needs to do this quickly. He doesn't need to slack in what he is doing. But I think we can take this too. Cursed is he who does the work of the Lord with slackness. We should not be doing God's work with slackness. We need to do everything with a joyful, energetic heart. And when we don't do the work of the Lord with energy, when we don't do it with cheerfulness, when we don't do it with excitement, there is a cursing that comes upon us. And of course, I don't think I'm implying that the Lord is like going to curse you if you're doing His work without a cheerful spirit. But there's just a drudgery that comes from not serving the Lord with a heart of cheerfulness. So don't do the work of the Lord with slackness. Don't do it with just kind of drudgery, but do it with excitement and joy. Moab has been at ease from his youth and has settled on his dregs, being the bottom of the all those. When you drink coffee, sometimes you get grounds in the bottom. That also will be there at the bottom of an alcoholic beverage or whatnot. And so there it is, this bitter stuff, beads at the bottom. They're saying that they've been at ease from their youth, but now they're having to drink the bitterness of the drink. He has not been emptied from vessel. He has not been emptied from vessel to vessel, nor has he gone into exile. So his taste remains in him, and his scent is not changed. He is now beginning to do that. It's not happened yet, but now it is coming. He is going to be settling on the dregs. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I shall send to him pourers who will pour him and empty his vessels and break his jars. Going back there, he's settled on his dregs. He's been at ease from his youth. He's not been emptied. He's not gone into exile. His taste remains in him. He's not had to drink the bitter coffee grounds, if you will. The scent is still the same, but there is coming a day when pourers will pour him out. He's going to get down to the bottom of the dregs, empty his vessels, and break his jars in pieces. Then Moab shall be ashamed of their God, Chemosh, as the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel, in their confidence. And Bethel would be the house, Bet, El, the house of God. Beth El, those are two Hebrew words combined. Bet, house of God, the house of God, Bethel. And so they were ashamed of Bethel because what were they doing in Bethel? Were they worshiping the Lord? No, they were worshiping false gods. And so Moab will be ashamed of their false god, even though they don't think he's a false god, Chemosh, just as the house of Israel will be ashamed or was ashamed of Bethel, their confidence. So pray that has been a helping and a blessing to you, and I'll see you in the next video.